The stage lights blazed hot over the crowded auditorium as cameras flashed and journalists filled every corner of the press pit. It wasn't just another political debate, it was the event everyone had been waiting for. On one side stood Donald Trump, the former president whose larger-than-life presence had dominated American politics for years. On the other was Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, a wealthy Democratic powerhouse, known for his sharp tongue and no-nonsense style. The moderators had promised a candid conversation on leadership, governance, and the state of America's economy, but the audience knew better. This wasn't going to be a polite exchange, it was destined to be a showdown. The tension crackled before the first question even landed. Pritzker leaned slightly back in his chair, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth as if he had already won the night. The moderator asked about leadership during times of crisis, specifically the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Without hesitation, Pritzker seized the opportunity. Leadership, he said with a mocking tone, isn't standing in front of cameras making everything about yourself. Leadership isn't chaos. And unfortunately, what America saw under Donald Trump was exactly that, chaos. Laughter and applause rippled through the audience, many nodding in agreement. Trump sat still, his jaw tightening as the words cut through the hall. Pritzker wasn't done. He leaned forward, eyes fixed on Trump, and added, "Real leadership means steady hands, clear plans, and the ability to put the people above your ego. Sadly, Mr. Trump, your record speaks for itself, and history won't be kind." The crowd erupted, sensing the governor had landed a heavy blow. But what they didn't expect, what Pritzker himself didn't expect, was the firestorm about to come his way. Trump's lips curled into a small smile, the kind of smile that signaled he wasn't hurt. He was preparing to strike. The room quieted, all eyes on Trump as he slowly leaned toward the microphone. Trump tapped the microphone once, the sound echoing through the silent hall. He didn't rush. He let the pause hang in the air just long enough for Pritzker's smug grin to falter. Then, in that familiar voice, equal parts forceful and sarcastic, he began. "Chaos?" Trump said, raising an eyebrow. "Governor Pritzker talks about chaos, but let me tell you something, the only chaos I see is in Illinois. Crime in Chicago is through the roof, taxes are crushing families, and businesses are fleeing your state faster than you can say leadership. And you're standing here trying to lecture me on what leadership looks like?" The audience shifted. A mix of gasps, murmurs, and even some scattered applause rippled across the auditorium. Pritzker blinked, clearly not expecting Trump to go for the jugular so quickly. Trump leaned closer, his tone sharp and deliberate. "You call me ego-driven, but what about you, JB? You inherited billions, spent your way into office, and now your state is drowning in debt. If you want to talk about steady hands and clear plans, look at your record. Illinois is the poster child for failure. You're lucky people don't laugh every time you say the word leadership." The crowd erupted. Half the room cheered, half booed, but no one could deny the shift in energy. Pritzker tried to interject, but Trump raised his hand, commanding the stage like he had done 1,000 times before. "And let me tell you something else," Trump continued, his voice booming now. "During the toughest moments in American history, I didn't hide behind excuses. I didn't sit back and collect a paycheck. I fought for jobs, I fought for borders, I fought for the American people. That's leadership. You can mock it, you can twist it, but the results speak louder than your insults." Cameras zoomed in on Pritzker's face. The smug confidence that had carried him into the debate was cracking, replaced with a tight jaw and narrowed eyes. Trump's counterpunch had landed, and the room could feel it. The moderator leaned in, clearly sensing the heat rising on stage. "Governor Pritzker, would you like to respond?" Pritzker adjusted his tie, forcing a chuckle. "Well, if we're talking about records, Mr. Trump, let's not forget yours. Multiple bankruptcies, investigations, and a country divided like never before. You can talk tough all you want, but the truth is, you left America weaker. The jab earned a fresh round of applause from Pritzker's supporters. He looked more confident again, but Trump didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, that familiar half-grin spreading across his face. It was the look of a man who had been underestimated too many times, and knew exactly how to flip the script. "You know, JB," Trump said smoothly, "you're very good at reading talking points. You've got the papers, the rehearsed lines, maybe even a few teleprompters hidden under that desk. But here's the thing, you can't fake strength. You can't buy respect. And you certainly can't compare a failing governorship to leading the United States of America." The audience gasped, followed by loud cheers. Trump leaned forward again, his tone dropping lower, more personal. "You talk about division? Let me tell you something. Division didn't start with me, it started with politicians like you. Career elites who think throwing money at problems is the same as solving them. But real Americans? They know better. They've lived the consequences of your policies." Pritzker opened his mouth to interrupt, but Trump didn't give him the chance. He pointed a finger straight at him, the camera zooming in to capture every second. "And as for bankruptcies?" Trump continued, voice booming now. "Yes, I've had business failures. But I turned them into bigger successes. That's called resilience. That's called fighting back. Meanwhile, your state is on life support, and you've done nothing but watch it bleed. So maybe you shouldn't lecture anyone on leadership, because the truth is, you wouldn't last one day in my shoes." The crowd roared, half in shock, half in approval. Even the moderators looked rattled, unsure of how to rein in the energy. The moderators tried to regain control, but the tension had turned the hall into a battlefield. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked non-stop, and the audience leaned in as if waiting for a knockout punch. Pritzker straightened in his seat, forcing himself to project authority. "Mr. Trump, you can point fingers all night, but facts don't lie. Under your administration, chaos spread worldwide. Our allies doubted us, our enemies mocked us, and here at home, Americans suffered. You don't get to rewrite history just because you're good at shouting louder." The line drew applause from his supporters. But before the echoes faded, Trump raised a hand, cutting through the noise like a blade. "JB," Trump said, his voice sharp and deliberate, "you're the last person who should talk about facts. Because the facts about Illinois are brutal: record-breaking crime, crumbling infrastructure, skyrocketing taxes, and people leaving your state by the thousands. That's not leadership, that's failure. And you want to stand here and pretend you've got the answers for America? Give me a break." The crowd gasped, some clapping, others booing, but Trump's words had landed hard. He pressed forward, unrelenting. "You accuse me of chaos? At least I built things. At least I fought. At least I had the guts to take on China, secure the border, and revive jobs that people like you said were gone forever. You've presided over decay. You've let Chicago become a symbol of lawlessness. And the only thing you've managed to grow in Illinois is bureaucracy." A roar of approval came from Trump's supporters. Even some neutral viewers couldn't help but nod at the sting in his words. Trump leaned in, lowering his voice just enough for the microphones to capture the venom. "So let's be clear. If this debate is about who America trusts to lead in a crisis, it won't be the man whose state is falling apart on his watch. It'll be the man who's proven, time and time again, that when the pressure is highest, he doesn't fold, he fights." The audience erupted. Even Pritzker, for the first time, looked shaken. The moderator, sensing the storm growing, tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. But Trump wasn't done. He turned squarely toward Pritzker, eyes locked, voice steady. "You want to talk about allies and enemies, JB? Let's do it. When I was in the White House, NATO paid up billions more because I made them. China finally faced tariffs they'd been dodging for decades. And let's not forget the Middle East deals everyone said were impossible, until I signed them. That's called leadership. That's called results. The audience clapped, some even rising to their feet. Trump let the applause breathe before landing the next blow. Meanwhile, what have you done? You run Illinois, and your citizens flee. You have businesses shutting their doors, families crushed by taxes, and kids trapped in failing schools. And yet, you come here to lecture me on leadership? Trump's tone shifted, sharp as a knife. JB, if America looked like Illinois right now, we'd be finished. Pritzker, red-faced, shook his head. That's fear-mongering. You exaggerate to scare people into following you. Trump smirked, leaning back in his chair as if he had anticipated the line. Then, with perfect timing, he struck again. Fear-mongering? No. It's called reality. Ask the thousands leaving your state every year. Ask the businesses fleeing to Texas and Florida. Ask the families locking their doors at night in neighborhoods where crime runs rampant. That's not my exaggeration, it's your record. And the American people know it. The hall erupted. Trump supporters cheered like it was a rally, and even neutral observers felt the tide turning. Pritzker had come to score easy points, but now, every attack seemed to ricochet back at him. The tension in the hall had reached boiling point. The moderators barely managed to keep order, but the crowd was alive with energy, half cheering, half booing, all locked in. Trump leaned closer to the microphone, his voice dropping to a calm but cutting tone. You know, JB, people like you always think loud words and big spending make you a leader. But let me remind you, leadership isn't about hiding behind a budget. Leadership is about standing in the fire when the whole world is against you. And I've done that, over and over again. Pritzker attempted to laugh it off. Standing in the fire? Donald, most of the time you started those fires yourself. The line got a chuckle from some in the audience, but Trump's smile didn't fade. He raised a finger, almost like a teacher correcting a student. And yet, JB, even when the fire started, I didn't run. I didn't blame someone else. I faced it head-on. And that's exactly why the American people trusted me with the Oval Office in the first place. Compare that to you, when Illinois faces a crisis, you throw money at it and hope it disappears. But it never does it? The words cut deep. Some in the audience shifted uncomfortably, realizing the truth behind the jab. Trump didn't let the silence linger. He pressed harder, voice rising with conviction. You mock my leadership, but here's the difference. I built a global business empire from nothing, I brought America back from decline, and I made decisions the so-called experts said were impossible. You preside over a sinking state and pretend it's progress. That's not leadership, JB. That's theater. The audience exploded, cheers drowning out boos. The stage belonged to Trump now, and Pritzker's smirk had vanished. Pritzker straightened his posture, clearly rattled but trying not to show it. He spoke louder now, hoping volume could mask the cracks forming in his argument. Donald, leadership also means compassion. It means building communities, supporting working families, and investing in the future. You call yourself a leader, but you divide people, you sow chaos, and you tear at the very fabric of America. For a moment, the room hushed, as though he had finally found his footing. But Trump didn't even flinch. He leaned forward, his voice sharp and deliberate, each word aimed like a hammer. Compassion? Trump asked, raising an eyebrow. Tell me, JB, what's compassionate about letting crime rise until families are afraid to walk the streets at night? What's compassionate about taxing people until they pack their bags and leave your state behind? What's compassionate about schools failing so badly that children never get a fair shot? The audience stirred, applause beginning again. Pritzker's eyes darted to the crowd, sensing momentum slipping through his fingers. Trump seized it. You talk about compassion, but compassion without results is empty. People don't need speeches, JB. They need safety, jobs, and freedom. And that's exactly what I delivered when I was president. The hall erupted in cheers, drowning out the few who tried to boo. Trump let the noise roll, then added the line that sealed the moment. You can keep your lectures about compassion. The American people are smart enough to know the difference between talk and action. And when it comes to action, JB, you're not even in the same league. The audience's roar shook the stage, and Pritzker's attempt to reclaim control had collapsed. By now, the debate felt less like an exchange and more like a trial where Trump was the prosecutor and Pritzker the defendant. The crowd leaned in, every word echoing with weight. Trump pointed across the stage, his voice booming. JB, you talk about unity, but let's be honest, you mock half the country. You call hardworking Americans backwards if they don't agree with you. You look down on people in rural towns while you cozy up to elites in big cities. That's not unity, that's arrogance. The words hit hard. Pritzker attempted to interject, but Trump pressed on, his rhythm unstoppable. And you know what? That arrogance is why people are leaving your state in droves. They're tired of being told what's best for them by politicians who've never lived their struggles. They're tired of empty promises while their communities collapse. They want strength. They want action. And they want results. The audience erupted into chants of USA. USA. The moderators tried to restore order, but it was impossible. The hall had become a rally ground, Trump's words carrying the fire of conviction. Pritzker leaned into his microphone, his tone sharp, almost desperate. Donald, you're good at slogans, but slogans don't govern. Real leadership is about policy, about legislation, about rolling up your sleeves and doing the work. Trump raised a hand, his reply immediate and fierce. And I did the work, JB, record jobs, energy independence, historic peace deals. That's not a slogan, that's a record. And your record? Skyrocketing taxes, rising crime, and people running for the exits. If that's your idea of work, America can't afford it. The crowd roared again, the energy electric. It was clear, Trump had seized control of the night, the moderator's gavel struck, but the roar of the audience drowned it out. Cameras zoomed in on the two men, Pritzker with a forced grin, Trump with an unshakable calm that carried an edge of dominance. Trump leaned in again, voice steady but sharp. JB, let me teach you something about leadership. It's not about throwing billions of dollars at problems while your people suffer. It's about having the courage to make the tough calls that actually fix those problems. And that's why, when I was in the White House, America was winning, winning on jobs, winning on energy, winning on security. Pritzker tried to laugh it off. Winning? You left office in chaos, Donald. The world watched America stumble because of you. Trump's eyes narrowed, his reply slicing through the air. Chaos? The only chaos is in Illinois, where families can't walk down the street without fear, where businesses close because of insane taxes, and where you pretend failure is progress. Don't talk to me about chaos, JB. I know what it looks like, and it's written all over your record. The audience thundered with applause, many standing to their feet. Even some who had been skeptical nodded along. Pritzker's attempt at composure faltered. He shifted uncomfortably, his hands tightening on the podium. Trump pressed on, delivering the knockout blow. You can mock my leadership all you want. But here's the truth, America remembers strength, not weakness. And when history writes this chapter, it won't be your lectures they remember, it'll be my results. The crowd roared louder than ever, the sound shaking the stage. Cameras captured Pritzker frozen, his earlier confidence completely stripped away. The debate hall was on fire with energy now, every camera, every reporter, every spectator glued to the showdown unfolding before their eyes. Pritzker, who had begun the night with a smirk and the confidence of a governor used to applause, now stood cornered, his arguments shredded one after another. Trump adjusted the microphone, his tone slower, deliberate, commanding silence before his next words. JB, you thought tonight would be about embarrassing me. You thought you could stand here, mock my leadership, and walk away with applause. But here's what really happened: the only thing exposed tonight is your weakness. The crowd gasped, then erupted in thunderous applause. Trump wasn't finished. He leaned closer, his voice sharp as steel. You've run Illinois into the ground. You've driven families out, destroyed small businesses, and mocked the very people you're supposed to serve. And then you stand here pretending to lecture me? That's not leadership, that's delusion. Pritzker's face tightened. He tried to speak, but his words were drowned by chants of Trump. Trump. Trump, echoing across the hall. The chants grew louder, rolling like a wave through the audience. Trump lifted his hand, signaling for quiet, then delivered the final strike. You tried to mock me, JB. But the truth is, you don't measure up. Not to my record, not to my strength, and certainly not to the American people's expectations. And that's why, whether you like it or not, this stage belongs to me. The explosion of applause was deafening. Flags waved, fists pumped, and the cameras caught Pritzker frozen in place, his defeat etched into every line of his expression.